Well, welcome everyone to the 9th annual No More Week and NWCAVE's virtual No More Summit. My name is Katie Yates and I am the co-founder and campaign director of Washington Says No More. And you are joining us for the last webinar of the week, Healthy Relationships and Understanding Dating Abuse, which is presented by Rosemary Estrada-Rade, who is the Director of Quality Assurance and Innovation at National Domestic Violence Hotline. And with that, I want to thank Rosemary for being here and transition it off to her.
Thank you so much, Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today for the No More Summit presented by NWCAVE. As Katie shared, my name is Rosemary. I'm with the National Domestic Violence Hotline and Love is Respect. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about healthy relationships. You know, when I was growing up and learning about dating and relationships, I think I could have really benefited from having this conversation with adults in my life. So we're going to talk about healthy relationships. We'll start with a little bit about Love is Respect and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And of course, at the end, have time for questions or a little bit more discussion about the topic. So the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a vital service. Our mission is to answer the call to shift and support power back to those affected by relationship abuse. We were established in 1996 and we're based here out of Austin, Texas. We just commemorated 25 years of providing services and have answered over 6 million contacts on the hotline. And that includes all our calls, chats, and texts. In 2007, we established Love is Respect. It's the site of our services that offer comprehensive resources to engage, educate, and empower young people to prevent and end abusive relationships. Love is Respect is guided and informed by our Youth Council, which is made up of teens and young adults from across the country. And they provide amazing insights on their needs and experiences around healthy relationships today. We just celebrated in February Teen Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and our theme was to talk about it. So I'm really excited to continue that conversation here today in this presentation. Across the nation, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So this is a commonly cited statistic that we use to illustrate how widespread and severe abuse is. We know that incidents are often underreported and that the actual number of people who experience physical abuse is likely higher than that. Another statistic that I wanted to highlight is that nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner in a single year. You know, when we established Love is Respect in 2007, it was in part due to this national discourse about what was happening in young people's relationship and the prevalence of physical abuse happening between young adults and teens. That's why services like Love is Respect that empower young people to have healthy relationships and to prevent dating abuse are so vital. In 2019, the hotline received 622,670 contacts, and that's again our calls, chats, and texts from people all over the US and its territories. And of those who reported a type of abuse, we heard about 90% were reporting emotional and verbal abuse, 61% were reporting physical abuse, 25% reported economic or financial abuse, and 30% reported digital abuse. And then 12% reported sexual abuse. And I wanted to share that statistic because I think a lot of times when people think about dating abuse or domestic violence, they think about physical violence. You know, a lot of things we see in the media are about bruises and bumps and just the physical signs of violence. But we do hear from a lot of people in abusive relationships talking about emotional and verbal abuse that they're experiencing. So I feel like it's an important part of the conversation to talk about the different types of abuse that people experience. So our goals for today and what I'll be covering are, we're going to talk about the essential elements of a healthy relationship and what it means to have a healthy relationship. We'll define consent and get really clear about it, also talking about the conditions necessary for consent to exist. We'll talk about how to understand the warning signs, what to be aware of abusive relationships, and talking about the different types of dating abuse and domestic violence. And then we'll also talk about how to support someone if you're concerned about them potentially being in an abusive relationship, and also how to refer to love is respect in the hotline. And so I've said this a couple times, but there'll be time at the end for questions and answers. So as I move through the presentation, if you have any questions, please drop them in the QA section and we'll make sure to answer them at the end. So what is essential to a healthy relationship? Well, here at Love is Respect, we believe that everyone deserves a healthy relationship. Relationships can be defined differently based on who's involved in a relationship. But we know that healthy relationships and having a healthy relationship depend on a few key elements. That's respect, equality, honesty, trust, communication, and healthy boundaries. So what do we mean by respect? Well, in a healthy relationship, partners are equals, and neither partner has authority over the other. Each partner is free to live their own life. Respect means that while we may not always agree with our partner, we choose to trust them and put our faith in their judgment. It means supporting each other and valuing each other's feelings. It means talking open and honestly. It means listening to each other non-judgmentally, being supportive. Equality is about making decisions together, or at least having an agreement about how decisions will be made in your relationship. It's about your partner or partners having the same amount of voice and power, and knowing that partners in a relationship have an open seat at the decision-making table. It means negotiation and compromise and mutual decision-making, deciding on things together, not any one partner making all the decisions in the relationship. Honesty and trust are important parts of a healthy relationship. It's important that each partner is accountable for their behavior and themselves. It means that they're being open with each other in a respectful way. It means that you accept responsibility for yourself in situations and that you're not blaming your behavior on your partner or blaming your behavior on your circumstances. It means admitting to being wrong. As hard as that is, being honest and admitting to being wrong are really important to having a healthy relationship. Trust, being there for each other. Gaining trust by being consistent and making sure that your words match your behavior in situations. Not being jealous if your partner has friends, family, outside relationships, or relationships outside of your dating relationship. That's normal, that's healthy. So trusting that your partner's not doing anything, making sure that you're not getting jealous if they're talking to people at work and school, knowing that that's a normal thing to do. And accepting change. What we mean by that is just relationships grow and evolve over time, right? As people grow and get to know each other better, relationships change. There's a lot of variables that make things change. If you add a family, if you add, other responsibilities. So knowing that just because a relationship started one way doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. And accepting that, yeah, it may eventually change, and that's okay. Communication. Open communication is vital to healthy relationships. Communication is essential because it can help you get to know your partner and their wants, needs, and their boundaries. That means it's also respectful, even when you're angry or upset, and that you're not saying aggressive, hurtful, harmful things or making retaliatory remarks. Open communication means it's free flowing in both directions. Not only one partner is communicating or being communicative about what they need. In a healthy relationship, there's space to discuss boundaries and expectations, but more importantly, to listen openly to each other's feelings and concerns. And it also means that Neither partner is scared to be honest about how they're feeling or afraid of their partner's reaction to something. So boundaries are needed in every relationship. And it looks like my slide's not working here, but they help you determine what you're comfortable with and are the limits that you set around your body, physical places, emotions, and financial information. Boundaries are yours to build, and they're really important to talk about as you begin a relationship that you want to have be healthy. Some examples of boundaries that you might set would be around your passwords, your personal financial information. It could even be having boundaries around your time, knowing that time apart is healthy, and that it's okay to do that in a healthy relationship. That could be a boundary that you set around your own time. It also means getting consent every time and respecting physical and sexual boundaries in a situation. So let's talk a little bit more about what consent means. So consent goes beyond no means no. Put simply, it's an ongoing mutual agreement between partners about what they want to experience. And it doesn't always have to be around something that's physical or sexual, but has more to do with decision-making behind your actions than the actions themselves. So you may have heard the phrase talking about consent. No means no. And that's true, but a statement like that doesn't provide a complete picture of the complexities that go into mutual decision-making and respect in a relationship. Using no means no, and even yes means yes, puts the responsibility on just one person in a relationship to resist or accept an activity. So instead of framing consent as a reactive measure in response to a partner's actions, we try to think of consent as something proactive, that's a conversation ongoingly where each partner is expressing what they're comfortable with and what they want to do. So what conditions are necessary for consent to exist? Well, consent is ongoing. It means it's continual. It's an ongoing conversation. It's something that is checked back in on. Consent in one moment is not consent in the future. And just because you said yes to something in the past doesn't mean that you're obligated to give consent, even if you've done so before. Consent means communication every step of the way. And it's not assuming that your partner is going to be comfortable with your actions. Consent requires a clear and enthusiastic yes, meaning if someone is unsure, if they stay silent, if they don't respond, or even say maybe, that's not an enthusiastic yes. That's not giving consent. Consent also means breaking away from any preconceived ideas on gender rules. There's no rule about who can initiate intimacy or who may want to take it fast or slow in a relationship. And most importantly about consent is that everyone has the right to their own body and to feel comfortable in their intimate relationships. So we've talked about the elements of healthy relationships and the framework to build them. We're going to look at the other side of the relationship spectrum now. Dating abuse, which is also known as domestic violence or intimate partner violence, is a pattern of behavior used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. The key parts of this definition are that it's a pattern of behaviors, right? So it's not just one thing that's happening, it's that pattern. It's that consistent use of controlling, manipulative, or abusive behaviors. It's also important to note that there are frequently multiple types of abuse occurring in one relationship. These abusive behaviors work to give one partner more power and control in the relationship than the other. A healthy relationship is based on equality, while an abusive relationship is fundamentally unequal. So it can be hard sometimes when you first get into a relationship to tell when a behavior goes from healthy to unhealthy or even to abusive. Early on in a relationship, it can be hard to kind of identify those warning signs. So that's why we're going to take a look at what some warning signs can look like. So there's a number of signs that, a relationship could be abusive or may eventually become abusive. And it's important to try to be aware of them so that you can recognize abuse as early as possible. One early warning sign of abuse is if a relationship moves way too quickly early on. That means like moving in together, getting married, having children, making really significant commitments to each other within a short period of time. That can leave a survivor in a more difficult position if they were wanting to leave the situation. Love bombing. I feel like love bombing is kind of a relatively new term, but these extreme romantic gestures that could seem romantic out of context, but are often used in combination with controlling or abusive behavior to confuse or overwhelm a survivor. Some examples could be, sending flowers to someone every day, buying them really expensive gifts, planning like a surprise weekend getaway early on in the relationship. It could also look like declarations of love really quickly, or again, the relationship moving really quickly or beyond what someone is comfortable with. How are you saying you love me already and it's been 2 weeks? These kind of extreme gestures of affection can be a big warning sign of potential abuse. Isolation is one of the most common warning signs of abuse. Abusive partners will often isolate victims from friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, or anyone else who could provide support. That could look like at the beginning of the relationship, they're fine with you, having your close coworker friend, and then eventually they start making the coworker friend the problem, or trying to isolate you from them, and trying to control who it is that you're interacting with. That's a big warning sign. And isolation can make it really hard for someone who's experiencing abuse to maintain that support network, to maintain those people that would tell them, that something's up with this relationship. It's really common for an abusive partner to violate or not respect a survivor's boundary in a relationship. That can be part of how they try to control and disempower them. Many abusive partners also show excessive jealousy. And we know jealousy is a normal human emotion, but in abusive relationships, it's often used to justify controlling or abusive behaviors. Being extremely jealous if their partner goes somewhere or is talking to somebody, or just anything. They use that jealousy as an excuse to be abusive. Along those same lines, wanting to know someone's actions, where they are, who they're with all the time is a common warning sign of abuse. They'll use that jealousy as an excuse to try to monitor their partner, making them turn on their GPS or trying to track where they're at all times. That's definitely a warning sign. Abusive partners often refuse to take accountability for their actions, or they may make excuses for their behavior. This can leave survivors feeling really confused about the relationship or like they're to blame for the abuse. Another warning sign is if a person has a history of abusing past partners. It's highly likely that they will also be abusive to future partners. Many abusive partners with a history of abuse will make excuse or even blame their past partners for the violence, like saying things like, my ex was crazy, or they're a liar, don't believe them. That's a big red flag or warning sign. It's really common for survivors to report this kind of Jekyll and Hyde behavior of their abusive partner, that they'll act one way with everyone else, but then be abusive towards them and their children. Not knowing what to expect from them, having explosive outbursts, things like that, but never in front of other people. So it kind of gives off this Jekyll and Hyde quality, like they don't know what to expect from their partner. So it's important to try to understand that each of these types of abuse and tactics are ways that an abusive partner eventually tries to gain that power and control over their partner. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the different types of abuse. So physical abuse is any behavior that's intended to cause bodily harm, disability, and/or death. And it includes physical means to control, harass, intimidate, or threaten a victim. So some examples of physical abuse are hitting, punching, kicking, at the extreme, strangulation, forced drug use or drinking. This is one that people don't often think of as physical violence, but prolonged sleep deprivation, messing with someone's sleep, keeping someone up all night in a fight, it can way physically impact somebody. Even denying someone medical treatment if there's an injury that happens. Emotional abuse. Those are the behaviors that they can feel more subtle at the beginning, but eventually are used to harm psychologically, mentally, and spiritually a partner in a situation. And some examples of this are the isolation, like we talked about, not allowing someone to see their family, not allowing them to access their support systems or what they may traditionally have turned to for support, making threats, being intimidating, using insulting language, acting extremely jealous or possessive, being really controlling, gaslighting, saying things that are intended to cause someone to doubt their feelings, instincts, or sanity. If you had a fight and they said something and you try to communicate or address it later on and they say, well, I didn't say that, that can be a form of gaslighting, somebody making them doubt their experiences. Sexual abuse. It's any behaviors that subject a victim to sexual contact or interactions without their consent, either by coercion, pressure, guilt, or force. Some examples of this are sexual assault, reproductive coercion. What we mean by that is sabotaging birth control, refusing to wear condoms, making someone get pregnant against their wishes, other forms of sexual abuse like not asking for consent, not disclosing STIs or STDs and purposefully transmitting them, pressuring someone for sex or different types of sex. Even if your partner isn't forcing you to perform sexual acts against your will, making you feel obligated to do them is coercion in of itself. So digital abuse, technology and the use of technology and the internet to bully, harass, stalk, intimidate, or control a partner is digital abuse. It's often a form of verbal or emotional abuse that's conducted online or using online methods. And it comes with its own unique challenges. Technology is so prevalent. There's a lot of different types of technology. It's constantly evolving. It can be hard to kind of keep up with all the things out there and their potential for misuse. But some examples are, a partner monitoring or controlling social media or access to technology, especially if someone was used to accessing their support system on social media. If their abusive partner is trying to monitor or control that, that's definitely isolating. Texting, calling, or messaging someone constantly, to a level where they can't maintain doing their daily activities. They're constantly being interrupted, or the partner's expecting them to respond immediately when they get a text, call, or message. That can be really disarming. Pressure to share passwords, pressure to send explicit messages or content, things like that. Those are all considered forms of digital abuse. And financial abuse. So financial abuse, I feel like, is something that we don't talk about often, but we know is occurring quite a bit. It's anything that limits access to financial information, resources, or the ability to achieve financial independence or stability. So some examples of this could be controlling or preventing someone's access to finances, not sharing in financial decisions, making all the decisions themselves, forbidding someone to work. We're actually interfering with someone's job by getting them fired or forcing them to quit. Damaging credit, using someone's personal information to open up lines of credit and not telling them, buying a new car and without them agreeing to it and not paying the note, things like that are financially abusive and can put someone in a really difficult position, for their future. So all of these are just some examples of the common types of abusive tactics. But it's important to remember that any behavior that's abusive is used to maintain and gain power and control, and it can potentially be one of these tactics. It's also important to understand that many victims experience multiple types of abuse at the same time. So we've talked about the elements of a healthy relationship, some of the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship, and the different types of abuse. And it's really important to talk about this because it can help people know what they should look for in a relationship and how to understand the health of their relationship. So the healthy relationship spectrum shown here shows how a relationship can look at those different points. In a healthy relationship, there's open communication, there's trust, there's respect, there's equality. In an unhealthy relationship, there could be disrespectful language, dishonesty, someone trying to take control of a situation. In an abusive relationship, there's mistreatment, there's denial of the abusive actions, there's control. So I think we're going to put the link to the relationship spectrum in the chat. But also our website, loveisrespect.org, has some amazing quizzes, to kind of assess your own relationship or, even a relationship that you might be potentially concerned about. So for many people seeking to try to support someone who's experiencing abuse, it can be hard. You can be unsure about what to say. You may be even intimidated or worried about saying the wrong thing. So when you're talking to someone who you may be concerned about who's experiencing abuse, it's really important to try to create a safe space where they can feel comfortable sharing their experiences. This means being non-judgmental. I think sometimes we have a tendency, I know I've done it myself, to badmouth the abusive partner or say things about them, and that can make someone feel judged, about who they care about. So it's really important to try to create that space and allow for them to share their story. The phrase is, can you tell me more about what happens when you and your partner argue? Naming the abuse for someone, if they're talking to you about their experiences with their partner and you're hearing things that are concerning, naming that for them can be really validating. So when your partner yells at you and calls you names, that's an act of verbal and emotional abuse. You can normalize feelings and reactions without normalizing abusive behaviors. It's oftentimes someone who's in that relationship feels like it's maybe their fault, but you can normalize their feelings about a situation. It's normal to feel frustrated when you and your partner don't agree on something, but it's not okay for them to yell at you and call you names. You deserve to be treated with respect, even if your partner is feeling angry or frustrated. So listening is really important. Starting that conversation is one of the best things that you can do to try to create a safe space for someone who you may be concerned is experiencing abuse. Especially young people, they want to talk to adults in their lives, about what's happening to them without judgment and without fear. So we actually partnered with the Allstate Foundation to create a guide for parents and caregivers about how to talk to people in your lives about dating abuse and domestic violence. So we'll also share that link as a resource. So there are also a number of national organizations that can help survivors of all types of violence. And here are some national advocacy organizations that could also be helpful resources. So of course, Love is Respect in the hotline. We're available 24/7 as an anonymous and confidential resource. Anyone who reaches out to the hotline in Love is Respect can expect compassionate and non-judgmental support from our advocates who have all received over 100 hours of training to support people with domestic violence and healthy relationship questions and needs. Strong Hearts Native Helpline is a confidential and anonymous resource for Native Americans and Alaska Natives, offering culturally appropriate support and advocacy services. RAIN runs the National Sexual Assault Hotline, which connects survivors of sexual assault and abuse with local hotlines in their area. Child Help runs the National Child Abuse Hotline, which can support survivors of child abuse and helpers who want to support victims of child abuse. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 to support anyone who's experiencing thoughts and urges of self-harm or suicide. The Trevor Project is a great resource for suicide prevention and a crisis intervention resource for LGBTQIA+ youth. Know Your 9, great resource for empowering students to end domestic violence and dating abuse on their campuses. And then Scarletine is a great inclusive resource for information about sexual health. So thank you. Thank you for having me here today. This is the information about how to reach out to us. Again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline and Love is Respect are available 24/7, all day, every day, by chat, call, and text. And this is how you can reach us.
Thank you, Rosemary. This is super informative, and we wanted to leave a good amount of time for everybody to send in their questions and answers, and you can do that by using your Q&A button. You can send it in anonymously if you would like to protect your safety, but we're going to go ahead and open up questions and start answering that right now. So with our first question, how do I remain safe dating online?
That's a great question. Well, we talked about the warning signs, right? So I think with online dating, that's a whole new realm for a lot of people. Online safety is really important, right? So still setting and maintaining your boundaries when you're online dating or exploring that is really important. Even if it's online or you're chatting with somebody, being aware of their language, the language that they're using, the things that they're saying, making sure that you set your boundaries and you stick to them, and that someone's not pressuring you to do things that you're not comfortable with. Like meeting in person, if you're not at that point where you have built that trust up or you feel comfortable doing that, making sure that somebody's not pressuring you to do things that you're not comfortable while you're building those kind of online relationships. Yeah.
And how do I know when it's going well in a relationship?
How do you know when it's going well? Yeah, I feel like that's different for every person, right? I mean, I think, personally, I've experienced healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships. For me, when I knew it was going well, I felt safe. I trusted my partner, we had healthy boundaries. I was maintaining relationships outside of my dating relationship that helped me as a person, help me maintain who I am. That's how I knew it was going well, is that we had that love, that respect, that equality in a situation. And there weren't things happening in the situation that made me feel uncomfortable or made me feel like something wasn't right. So I feel like trusting your gut is really important in those situations. Like if you feel like something's off, then trust yourself. You know yourself best, your relationships best. So if you feel like something's off, that's definitely something to explore with yourself, or even to talk to somebody about and kind of get some perspective on, hey, is it normal when somebody does this? Because I think sometimes outside parties are good sounding boards to kind of reflect back to us what we're saying, to hold us accountable, to say like, oh, that doesn't seem right. Or there's a reason why you don't feel comfortable with that, So yeah, I think that's a great question. How does it feel right? I think that depends on you and what you're comfortable with.
Another question. How do I leave or know when I should leave a relationship?
I'm always going to center who is in the relationship themselves, so I think that's only a question that you can answer for yourself. At the hotline and Love is Respect, we try to empower survivors to do what they feel like is safest or best for them. So I would never tell somebody when I think they should leave a situation or make a change. I think that's up to you to decide. The only thing that I would say is that if you're in an abusive relationship, leaving can be a really dangerous time. And so I would, of course, encourage you to reach out for support when it's safe to do so. Talk about what you want to do, get some resources, but just to be aware, that can be a dangerous time. And so if you're trying to make that decision for yourself, also keeping it to yourself or just within people you can trust, not sharing that with an abusive partner, because it can cause things to get unsafe, or if someone's really controlling, they don't necessarily want you to leave. So they could escalate their abusive behavior or do things that would make it really hard for you.
And there's more information on how to do that, creating a safety plan, on thehotline.org as well as loveisrespect.org. Another question we have, how do I start a relationship with the same sex if I've never done that before?
Yeah, Love is Respect is a great inclusive resource to talk about it. But I also think too, it's again, what are you comfortable with? Do you, are you comfortable talking to the person that you're interested in about starting a relationship? That's between you two and who you're interested in, right? So whatever you're comfortable with is going to decide that. But I think just starting out with having a conversation, if you're interested in somebody, can be a place to start. And then using those building blocks of the healthy relationship that we talked about, building trust, making sure that there's consent in the situation, making sure that you have boundaries, for yourself, deciding what do I want in a relationship and how can I make sure that the relationship that I'm establishing or that I'm working on is meeting my expectations and what I want in a partner.
Another one. So this person thinks their friend is in an abusive relationship. How can they support that friend?
Yeah, I know that can be a really hard situation, right? To see someone that you care about that could be potentially in an abusive relationship. And so I think just starting the conversation at a time where it's safe for them, not calling them out in front of their potentially abusive partner, but taking the time and space to reach out and say, hey, I'm concerned. You can keep it behavior-based. So of course, staying non-judgmental about the partner, because that can kind of turn people away from you. But if you keep it centered on behaviors that are unhealthy, that can be a place to start. If there's an example of something that you've witnessed or that you're concerned about, you can use that as a starting place. When your partner yelled at you the other day in front of everyone, that was really concerning. That can be sometimes a sign of verbal or emotional abuse. I'm concerned about you. Can you tell me more about what happens when those things come up? I think starting the conversation and just letting them know that you care can be really important, because I think when you're in an abusive situation, you can be really isolated from people. And so you may even be feeling like it's your fault. Your friend may be feeling like the abuse that's happening is their fault, or they've done something to cause it. So even just reaching out and creating that safe space to talk about it can be a really vital way to try to support someone. I will say, of course, you're always welcome to contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline or Love is Respect and talk about it with somebody and get some education and some resources that you could share with them.
Another question, what's the line between being unhealthy and unhealthy? My partner and I argue a lot. Is that normal?
That's a great question. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the situation? Again, I try to think about it as centering who's in the relationship and how they feel about it. So it would be hard for me to say, if it's unhealthy or abusive, because I'm not in your situation. But I will say abuse is about power and control. So if the arguments are always uneven, if one person is always at fault in a situation, if one person is always the one that's in trouble, or you're always being blamed for things that you're not doing, that can be a sign that things might not be equal in your relationship, or that there's a power dynamic there. So I think every relationship has disagreements, right? Like if we're communicating openly and in a healthy way, we're going to disagree sometimes. Like that's normal. But where it gets unhealthy is if there's power and control in a relationship. One person's always at fault. It's not open communication. You're being called names or disrespected every time. Those are things that can verge on unhealthy or abusive.
And Rosemary, you mentioned that you can take a quiz online at loveisrespect.org, and
Yeah,
answering that quiz might narrow down more where your relationship lies on that spectrum. So make sure you
absolutely.
take that quiz and download the PDF in the chat as well. Another question. We'll wait one more. Okay. What describes healthy communication? I know, Rosemary, you've talked about this a couple times. Can you give a little more noted key things when it comes to healthy communication?
It's respectful. It's open, honest. I think communication looks different in every type of relationship, right? So it's how you define it. But I do think healthy communication has a few key elements, right? So making sure that it's honest, that it's respectful at all times, even if you're angry or upset, that you're not, calling your partner names or, being really mean to them, and keeping it free flowing. And I think a good self check for yourself is, are you afraid? Like, are you afraid to say certain things in your relationship? Like that fear is a warning sign that something could be off, because healthy communication is open and flowing and is without fear. And so I think those are all really like key elements of having healthy communication.
And how do I know when I'm ready to start dating? It's a good question.
Yeah. I go back to this, we are survivor centered and people centered. So I think that's up to you. I think defining what you want in a relationship, knowing your boundaries, those are all really good ways to kind of prep yourself. And then again, like being aware of the signs, not to start a relationship thinking that anything is going to go wrong, but just knowing like, hey, everyone's different and you get to decide for yourself, what your boundaries are and what you want to look for in a partner. So how do you know when you're ready to date? That's up to you. I think being in a good place with yourself can be really a good place to start. And then, just deciding kind of what you want to look for in a relationship and exploring that. Yeah. I think it's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We have another question. this person wants to leave a relationship. However, they're worried about their partner harming themselves. And before we go into that, I want to reiterate, if you feel you are triggered at any point, you may log off, mute us, whatever you need to do to take some self-care, ground yourself, take some breathing exercises. Now I'll pass that question off to Rosemary.
Yeah. I guess my question would be if the partner has threatened that in the past when this person has tried to leave, that can be a warning sign of abuse. It is actually one of the really common thing that we hear on the lines at the hotline, is an abusive partner threatening to harm themselves. And that's not to say that somebody could not be, considering self-harm or potentially be suicidal. But it's something that we found that abusive partners can use as a control tactic. It's kind of the thing that will keep someone who loves them and is concerned about them from taking that step, from leaving, is if they threaten to harm themselves or they threaten to do something to themselves. And that's extremely concerning. If you love and care about somebody, you're not going to want that to happen, of course, but it's also not your responsibility. So it can be a really, really hard thing in an abusive relationship. Again, of course, if you're thinking about leaving an abusive relationship, that's why it can be a dangerous time, is because someone who's abusive is going to try to maintain that control however possible. So getting resources, getting education, talking about it in ways that are safe for you can be really important to kind of explore all of those things, to explore what you've tried in the past, what has happened then when you did try to leave or make a change, and how can we help you be safer moving forward.
And we have a couple more minutes. You can send in your questions now before we log off, so make sure to send them in. And if we don't get to it, you can email us at katie.nwcave@gmail.com, or once again, reach out to any of these hotlines on the screen right now. Read it out loud: 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233. That is in the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Also, Love is Respect. You can text the line Love is, no space, to 1-866-331-9474. Any final questions? Give one more moment. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rosemary. This was so informative, and we hope that it helped everyone to either help themselves or someone else to be informed. And once again, you can learn more with the documents that were attached in the chat to download, or visit thehotline.org or loveisrespect.org. My name is Katie Yates, and you have reached the final free webinar of the No More Week. Rosemary, thank you for closing us out with the webinars. This is great.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, and we do want to remind everybody that you can tune into the virtual No More Summit tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time on our nonprofit at NWCAVE Facebook page. And we will have Grammy-nominated artist Mary Lambert performing and sharing her survivor story. So please make sure you tune in then. And I want to wish everybody a wonderful day. And together we can end domestic violence and sexual assault. Take care, everybody. Thank you.